All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here, alongside Sam. And we told you that if there was a reason for an emergency podcast because of Chelsea's work in the transfer market, we would be bringing it to you during the holiday weekend here in the United States. And whew, it happened in the afternoon, U.S. time. We got the Fabrizio Romano. Here we go. After days, weeks, feels like months, maybe a lifetime of Alejandro Garnacho posts coming from Fabrizio Romano about how his heart was set on Chelsea. He only desired Chelsea. The Argentinian attacker and winger is going to be coming to Chelsea to play this season under Enzo Maresca. And Sam, we're here. We're ready. You're locked in. You did some preparation actually in advance for this one, figuring it was just going to be the longest run up and close out of the transfer window for Chelsea. And it ends up getting done on the 28th, essentially 29th officially, most likely when it gets dropped, that Garnacho ends up being a Chelsea player in Chelsea blue and will have an opportunity to face Manchester United at least twice this season to show them what they were missing by letting him walk up and out of Old Trafford.
Yeah, I was sort of, just getting over the fact that 7 games of Xavi Simons preparation would not come in handy. And then, hey, got the here we go. So essentially had to stop, dry my tears, and then get back to work. So it's basically had to jump back on. But glad that I have something to distract myself. And yeah, I'm actually big on this signing. I wouldn't say big, but I'm actually quite, in favor of this signing, which I'm thinking goes against the grain for a lot of people who are quite cynical, are not really hyped up about this signing. But on the good side, a lot of really, really smart Chelsea content creators, much better minds than me, are also on the same page. So I must be seeing something right. So, so yeah, I'm quite optimistic about this, Dan, and I think, and I really, really hope that he can come and pleasantly surprise all of us.
Stop. Well, first off, stop, because there are not many, if any, better than what you're doing when it comes to putting out some content, particularly at the speed and pace that you do so. I think I've seen that as well, that there are definitely individuals who seem like they really really like the idea of Garnacho. I think, just from like the stats that I like that kind of bring me into the conversation for him, is just the shots per 90 is super fantastic. I mean, he has 3 seasons now, including the one that just passed, 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, 3.8, 3.5, 3.44 shots a game. I mean, that is just something. If you're shooting at high volumes per game, it's going to put you an opportunity to score goals. Again, not as impressive. I mean, 3, 7, and 6 of those last 3 seasons, 2 assists, 4 assists, and then 2 assists. So his kind of total goal contribution in his time at Manchester United has been 16 Premier League goals. He's had 28 assists and essentially 24 goal contributions over those couple of seasons there. But I think something that's just underlying is promising enough to be excited about. And again, he is at time of signing 21 years old. So there is a lot of positive, forward trajectory for him within his career, and his total kind of goal contribution, when you take in all the other kind of competitions that Manchester United were involved in, was 9 that first season, 15 the second season, and 21. So he's been on very much an upswing over the 3 years. Well, actually, Manchester United have been on very much of a downswing. It almost feels like the elevator cord just got cut and they are dropping. He's finding a good way to escape with some skills and talents that maybe they wouldn't want to have leave, but for the fee that Chelsea kind of apparently have agreed to, around a £40 million package, that he will be coming to Chelsea. I mean, are those some of the stats that we're going to talk about in this one? Because again, we let people know our preview player pods very much focus on the story, the narrative. We get into a little bit of how he performed at Manchester United. We'll talk about his strengths, his weaknesses, kind of where we could see him potentially improve. And then we have a ton of listener questions from Discord too that we want to get into. But those are the reasons I think I see some promise within that signing. Again, any player that signs for Chelsea gets the maximum support, at least until they decide that they're going to go do an interview and say that they don't want to be here anymore. What are your thoughts, Sam?
Well, I mean, I'm like I mentioned, I'm quite up for this signing in terms of, like you mentioned, there are some really good fundamentals to go by. The numbers look good, and especially if you're pulling them out in a team that is spiraling downwards towards the abyss, then from a data standpoint and from an eye scout's perspective, then there are really good things to go by. But yeah, in general, I think there are some really, really good things that you can for certain count on that it's going to be, there, it's going to translate well because you're in the same league, you're also moving across. So those things are definitely going to be there. But there are other things that may not have been utilized or underutilized at United. They can probably polish and just garnish a little bit and hope that in a better system with better players, no disrespect to Manchester United, it will come to the fore. So that's what I'm looking for. I think you just mentioned that he's just turned 21, so he was 20 up until July, early July, and so he's still very, very young. I don't even think he's reached anywhere close to the peak of his powers. So hopefully, over the next 1.5, 2 years, you can take that 2.5 year PL experience and then polish him as much as you can. And Enzo Maresca, credit to him, has shown that he can improve multiple players, especially younger guys, and give them a framework to express themselves in. So we're hoping Garnacho can do something similar.
Well, why don't we get into then just the story, as it were? You kind of tend to put together a narrative to help us understand the player's footballing journey. So I do think there are some interesting things in there, particularly around just, Argentinian mother, Spanish father, his time at Atletico Madrid and the youth academy that you want to kind of cover, as well as kind of just the push into and what some of the maybe challenges have been for him, in that kind of journey as it relates to Manchester United as a rockier part of the path.
So interestingly, I mean, if you go to the Atletico Madrid website and roll back the years, and you can see a little cute-looking kid, Alejandro Garnacho Ferreira, nationality Spanish, and essentially in the Atletico Madrid academy. And he was born to a Spanish father and an Argentinian mother in Madrid. And he began his youth career with Getafe in Spain, and then moved to Atletico Madrid's youth academy. He actually began as a center forward there and did really well. There was a tournament in the under 14s, and he ended up as top scorer in December 2016. So promising beginnings there, and moving through ranks, impressing. In 2020, United sort of had his eye on him and paid €500,000 and essentially got him into their youth setup. And in 2023, he won the Jimmy Murphy Award, which is the best young player at United. And it's an award that has been won by the likes of Ryan Giggs and Paul Scholes. He then went on to make his debut against us in a 1-1 draw. And I believe he's gone on to bag about 2 goals and at least 1 assist against us in the games that he's faced against us. So, I mean, you really want to look at the data, but every good scouting book highlights the fact that most teams are likely to sign players that do well against them. So here's a little bit of trivia in the story. He again from that youth setup, he's gone on to play 3 games for the Spanish under 18s. But Javier Mascherano spoke to him at United and convinced him to switch allegiance to Argentina. So he almost made the World Cup squad of 2022. There were some key injuries in wide positions to Angel Correa and Nico Gonzalez, but he narrowly missed out on a World Cup medal. And yeah, just continued impressing. Like you mentioned, his stats are on an upward trajectory. He's at the age of 20 amassed 93 league appearances, which is quite impressive. And he now arrives at Chelsea after Ruben Amorim basically said he wasn't going to feature in the first team plans anymore. But ostracized, moved away from first team because of so-called PR issues and whatnot. But good for us because we got him despite the deal, despite people saying, oh my God, it's still too much, 35, 40 million plus a 10% sell on. I think, a healthy United with like half a brain would probably have been able to flip him for 60, 65 to a good team. So I believe we've had a very, very good deal here. And once more, we've just, I think we're playing the market. We're just looking for opportunities and trying to make the most out of them.
Well, we will see again, I think in very short fashion, how well he fits in the side, how well he can improve Chelsea's odds this season across multiple competitions. But we're going to do our first ad break when we get back. We will be talking about his tactical fit at Manchester United. Again, he had a chance to play against under Ten Hag and Emery. So some interesting and some different managerial styles there that we're going to talk about, and then we'll get into his strengths as well. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. I think the framing here, Sam, we had one from another Nick, not Nick from the podcast, but Nick from Discord, Blue London 1905, asking just about the struggles at United down to Amarin's formation and general ineffectiveness of United as a team, or was he part of the problem? And I do think you want to take a little bit of a moment when talking about that tactical fit to mention the time under Aaron Ten Hag, who gave him his debut at Manchester United, and how he deployed him, and then how that evolved under Amarin in a effectively wingerless attack system.
I think that's the key difference to make. You could put it down mostly to, I think, the tactical system. Eric Ten Hag is somebody who's known as empowering youth. So at Ajax, if you go, you've got, Donny van de Beek, then you had Frankie de Jong, Matthijs de Ligt, all breaking out in that breakout Ajax campaign, who we faced in that incredible 4-4 draw at the bridge. So he did look at Alejandro Garnacho very early and said, I want this kid, to play for me. And recognized instantly that he was somebody who was a conventional winger, who also played on the right hand side because Marcus Rashford was on the left, and obviously seniority and prestige aside, you wanted him to be, obviously given that left slot because he wasn't really good on the right. So you asked him to, like Garnacho would just receive on the touchline. He had some freedom to move inside into central half space areas, but it was generally just receiving and then trying to break, because that's where I think Garnacho excels. You've got transition opportunities. Ten Hag was obviously ostracized for saying, no, this is not United's, identity. You're doing a lot of work without the ball, and then you're just living off the counterattack. But Garnacho was somebody who thrived in that situation because he is, at least when he's carrying the ball, uncontested and through lines, he's quite quick. He can cover distance quickly. So he gives you that, that thrust in transitions. And a lot of his really, really good work actually happened when he was moving without the ball. So we'll talk about this more in the strengths, but it's just a lot of combination play and trying to figure out if he can attack spaces rather than trying to get the ball into certain areas. So that's what I think stood out under Ten Hag. And then Amorim came in, and the wingers became non-existent. Anthony went to Real Betis. Ahmad became a wing back. Rashford left. Sancho left. And Garnacho, I think, was one of the very few that just survived and didn't have to play as a wing back. So he was given freedom to rotate outside sometimes, but his starting position was narrow. It was almost an attacking midfielder, half space position from where he had to orchestrate and essentially try to do different things than he was doing. And to his credit, he added a few things to his repertoire. He added off ball stuff that wasn't there before. He was underlapping a lot more, offering a little bit of fluidity with his wing back on the left hand side. So um, I think it was a learning curve for him to adapt to a different kind of situation. And it's interesting that his output didn't see a massive drop. Like it was just a couple of goals or assists lower than when he was playing his conventional position. And he played only about 300 or 400 minutes fewer in playtime. And that was largely due to Mason Mount and Ericsson being injured. But obviously, at this point in time, you've got Mount back, you've got Mbeumo and Cunha being signed for big fees. So, Amorim just probably just said, no, you don't have a place here anymore. So was essentially moved from the first team picture. I would like to give a little hat tip here to Kia Doyle and Ashwin Raman, who've done two really good pieces on Alejandro Garnacho. So Kia Doyle has his YouTube channel, his Spotify podcast also is great. So you can just listen to it either platform. And Ashwin did something with Scouted, which is a scouting based magazine. So he just profiled Garnacho for them. I think was it Scouted or was it Opta Analyst? One of the two. I apologize, but yeah, he basically both of them made some very key points about saying that essentially, if I could sum it up, United were garbage, and you look at their setup, they lack inventiveness. They don't have the weapons to find players in dangerous positions, and the only guy who takes the burden on it is Bruno. And other than that, Mount was there, Ericsson was there, but both have been injured, so a lot of the onus has been on Bruno, and it's just been haphazard. So it's difficult to be a winger in situations where you can't be found in advantageous positions. And also in a back three, by default, you have one fewer attacker. So whenever you do get into good positions, there's just one body less to hit inside the box. And Amarim's, like, one of the biggest criticism of Amarim's is that he just doesn't get enough players into the box. He doesn't create those avenues to score. So it's hard to be a winger in that system. So to answer Nick's question, the other Nick's question, yes, it is definitely tactical. And more than Garnacho's performances, I think it's just um, he's been robbed of certain things, his positional freedom, his favored position, and just more options to interact with and options to hit inside the box.
All right, then. Well, you set a good foundation. And I would love then to take us through exactly what are those strikes, the things that people are going to see about in the YouTube, just highlight reel clips, the shorts that are going to get people very, very excited for what they're going to see from Garnacho when he comes to Chelsea. And I think, some of the things that come to mind for me, I mentioned again, the shooting in the volume of shooting is going to be something that I'm really looking forward to seeing. And I know that some of that off the ball movement as well. But what are a couple other things, or do you want to go deeper on either of those two to start us off here?
I think the shooting is something that you brought out like straight off the bat, and let's just address that. Like you said, 3.8. I mean, that was only 6 games, but on average, he's around 3.5, 3.6 shots per 90, which in my opinion, puts him somewhere in the 99th percentile for shot takers from wing. So genuinely a very, very good thing to have. Obviously, if you're shooting more, then you're creating more opportunities to obviously get the goal. But just having that base is very, very nice. And I think the quality of his shooting also complements the quantity. He is a two-footed shooter. He can place and generate power with both. There are ample examples of him getting into good positions and essentially just you know trying to pick the right option, picks a nice variety, also has this chipped finish, can dink it over, can place it, can whip it in. So a lot of variety with either foot, which is very promising at his age. He unfortunately missed, I think, 14 big chances last season, which is quite a heavy number, but I think it's more encouraging that he's getting those opportunities. And if he can just come back to the normal, mean of just maybe getting 60, 50% of those chances in, then a few more goals gets him closer to 10, which is superb for a winger. So I think from that numbers perspective, that's good. He's very good from long range as well. So from the left side, if you give him ample opportunity to shoot, he will open up his body and smack it in with either foot. So I would say that that's something that I would mark out as a strength. The off ball is something that impresses me a lot, and I think it comes from his center forward education. And I would say, like, if he was a little taller, he would essentially be just a center forward on the wing. His movement is very similar to a striker's at times. He, plays off the shoulder a lot. So a lot of wingers, for example, Jamie Gittins, just likes being on the touchline because then you can isolate and then you can run at people. Garnacho is a little different. He knows he's not really a 1v1 demon, but he's more about staying close to his fullback, even being sort of like in a left forwards position and then trying to explode inside. So he plays off the shoulder. He can give you diagonal runs inside across his fullback. There are some other really, really good out to in runs which he can do for through balls. He can also just plain run in behind like a normal number nine does, and that gets him a couple of really good opportunities. So if you have somebody who can hit an early long ball from behind, like Colville or Tosin also has some really nice balls there. Chalobah has picked up a couple. So if you've got the centre backs there, if you've got Moises Caicedo there who are picking out those balls, then Garnacho will be able to offer you a very impressive quality and quantity of runs, which I think will benefit the front line in spades. And just the third one before we talk more is it's I think his defensive industry is quite good as well. I wouldn't say his duels are good. Like the duels could be better quantity and quality wise. He sometimes is a little reluctant to get stuck in. He is gritty, but he will chase you down, wouldn't really like tackle in deeper areas, but in the attacking third, he's good. He's very, very strongly inclined towards the more psychological aspects of defending. So he tracks back, very switched on in terms of where his man is, will help out his fullback 2v1. He's very vocal also, will shout at people, organize out of possession, shape and responsibilities. So I think overall, if you have a winger who can offer a good level of threat and also complement that with defensive industry and making sure that he's not a passenger, then we have something great to start off with.
And then maybe just going a little bit further into some of the things that you're mentioning about just in, again, he's an attacker. So all of these strengths do feel like they isolate and they zone in on just, his deliveries into and around the box, and then also just how he gets into the box as an attacker. Can you go through maybe just a little bit more about, you know, he's kind of, his touches within the penalty box, I think, is a very, very undercovered element of his profile, and then just some of his ability to cut back into, dangerous positions for other attackers. That, again, we have players like Joao Pedro who might enjoy this. We have someone like Enzo Fernandez, a fellow countryman, who might enjoy this as well.
Like I mentioned at the start of the pod, there are like far smarter people capable of putting it much better than I could. And I would like to quote one such person. So, Chicago Dimitri, who's obviously a friend of the pod. So, he tweeted out saying, since 2017, there have been only 4 times that an under 21 winger played 2,000 minutes in a top flight league, took more than 3 shots per game, and had more than 2.5 successful carries into the box per game. The first one is Lamine Yamal. The second one is Estevao. The third is Garnacho, and the fourth is also Garnacho. So if you have somebody who can offer that level of threat from not just shooting, but also give you just box penetration. So Kier also quoted Billy Bean on his pod. And he says, why do we like him? Because he gets on base. And I think that's accurate with Garnacho. You look at his numbers, and I think the first full season was 7.2 touches in the penalty box, and then there were 8.7 last season, which puts him again in the 99th percentile in the Premier League. So gets into the box, carries into the box, gets very close to goal with the ball. What he does later on is, obviously we can talk about it later and compartmentalize and pick it apart, but just doing those two things right, offering 3.5 shots a game and offering 8.5 touches in the penalty box is an incredible set of ingredients to work with in a wing. It's like, being given Michelin star ingredients and say cook something, and you can essentially, then depends on the quality of the chef, and sometimes it doesn't, but you can try and put together something in terms of a player who can improve in other aspects. But when I look at those two things, then I really really see a player who can, with the right kind of coaching, with the right kind of application, explode. And that's definitely something that I would point out. Box penetration, giving you a lot of threat, just getting you inside the penalty box is a huge strength from Garnacho. And the last one is something, is, I think, again, quite underrated. I think his cutbacks are very very good. He's he shows a lot of nifty quality on it. So he, again, two-footed. The weight and timing of his release are very good. He tends to pick them out in even tight situations. There are a lot of times where he waits for the player to stretch, like the defender to stretch to try and block the cross, and he essentially does a nutmeg cross through the legs of the defender to find somebody. And if United were anywhere, had their shooting boots on or didn't have players like Hoyland at the end of it, he probably would have hit like 10 assists easy. There were an incredible amount of chances from his cutbacks that people should have done better with. So I could count at least 5.5 that I saw. And could have been like really, really good assist numbers there. So I think the cutbacks are good. And if you can push him into areas and give him more bodies into the box, then I think he can definitely go past the 4, the very meager 4 that he managed at his best season in United, and could easily become somewhere like a 6, 7. He's not a, let's just get this clear, he's not a Michael Olise. He's not somebody who will offer you inventiveness, but he'll just offer you like the basic cutbacks, the more frugal, the more just direct form of a supply line. And I think that's good enough for the guys that we have.
Well, now that we talked about his strengths, let's get our last ad break in. When we come back, we'll talk about areas that he can improve in at his time at Chelsea. I think some of those things, like being just a touch more creative and separation. And then we'll also get into some of the tactical fit, weaknesses, and listener questions. So stay tuned. Be right back. All right, Sam. So walk me through just a couple areas where you think Garnacho coming to Chelsea can improve. And these are more of when we define strengths, weaknesses, and areas the player can improve in. It's that they show with things that they can improve in that they are capable of doing it. But it's a matter of maybe application, evolution, their style of play, how they fit into a system. And then the weaknesses are really just maybe areas that they're gonna have a hard time just in the very, very far reaches of their future, but ever becoming better at that. So really the focus is more on how do you maximize strengths? How do you maybe mitigate against those weaknesses? And can you improve on those areas of middle ground to make them into a strength or maybe mitigate against them if they are kind of truly weakness?
Yeah, I think the good place to start would be something I've personally noticed. This is again just a very, very subjective opinion. I do think his separation is a bit of an issue, and this is an issue both in his shooting as well as his dribbling. So people would have noticed, people who've watched him a lot, that he's not really somebody who's, I would say, elite explosive athlete. He's not Jamie Gittins. He's not somebody who'll, stand you up and then just boom past you like Roadrunner. He's not that kind of player. He's more about a little bit of deception. He will force you to make a tackle, then he'll go either way and get past you. So the key here is trying to make that extra yard and an extra half a yard in the Premier League because it's very, very hard. And I think he struggles because, again, when he's trying to take on people, his strides are very short. And when he tries to cut either way to create a little bit of space, it still leaves a lot of room for the defender to try and make a second action. So it's often hard for him to fully get away from a player or fully create some kind of shooting room for himself. And in transition, it's, I would say, again, when you're again against a backpedaling defender, then it's easy to go in those situations and try to make that happen because there is a lot of instability in that movement already. But against set defenses, against back fives, against defenders that are quite set in their position, it can be very hard to do. So a lot of the challenge will be trying to figure out how he can make himself a little more unpredictable and how he can create a little more space consistently. I think that's the big thing for him because his shooting is already there with his left and with his right. It's very, very good. So if you can get into those areas where he can utilize his shooting and get that extra bit of space in a team that will obviously give him very stable, slow possession moves, that will be an interesting challenge. I don't know whether he'll struggle or whether he'll adapt, but that's one challenge for me to see whether he'll be able to consistently do it. But yeah, the shooting is really good. Just needs to create that space consistently for him to work it out. At United, there was a lot of space. Here, it'll be harder to get it, which is unfortunately what Jamie Gittins also found out first day of the season against Crystal Palace. The second thing is something we talked about. He's not Michael Olise, so the creativity is a major issue. I think he is not anywhere close to being a refined enough, consistent creative threat. He's only got 13 big chances created in 93 games, so needs to go a long way to go before he can rack up, I would say, a certain number that would reflect his assist numbers or at least like boost them to a certain point. So I think that's the big challenge for him. How can he create better shots? What other avenues other than cutbacks and crosses does he have? How can he do something better in central areas? That's something that you would like to see from him. And as a two-footed player, you want to demand that from him. He's shown some glimpses of picking out nice through balls with his left foot for Rashford. While cutting in, he's shown some other passing, which looks really good, but then you wonder why he doesn't do it very often. So his decision making, his vision, how he hones his creativity, I think is going to be another thing. If he has to get to that 15 GA mark, he can't really just stay on 4 assists and get it because that means scoring 11. So I think to have a more balanced perspective, he needs to up the other side of his game as well.
And then just on the weaknesses, you didn't put a lot in the script here, but I do think there's one that just in general comes to mind. And I think that it is basically no aerial threat whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, unfortunately, that we do have at the club with the most of our wingers. We've tried this tactic a lot where you get somebody at one of the half spaces and you cross to the far post, and the only guy who's come up pops is Kukureya. And, we've tried putting Gittins there, we've tried putting Neto there, who quite coincidentally got a really nice goal at the far post against West Ham. So you want somebody to essentially offer you maybe a little bit of heading threat. He did get a headed goal against us in that terrific game at Stamford Bridge where Cole Palmer screamed and essentially got 2 goals at the death, but he did score a headed goal there, arriving late from that cross. But that's essentially what you want from him. Maybe a little bit more aerial threat in duels. I think heading wise at the far post, he can still create an issue, but at least in engagements across the pitch against players of a similar caliber, I think he could do better. But not really something you want from a winger in places other than the box. So I think he should be all right. But that's definitely a weakness. And the other stuff I would just borrow from the places that I've said that you need to improve. His dribbling isn't world class. He's a winger, but he's not a world class dribbler. He's not a take on artist. He's just a very good ball progressor. He's somebody like a Liam Delap who will give you hard yards up the pitch, but he's not going to get you a 60% take on percentage unless something magically changes in the next couple of years. So I think that's like the weaknesses and the can improve sort of overlap for me. So that's the things that he needs to generally improve. Aerials can remain as it is, but how high he goes in his Chelsea career depends a lot on how well he improves what he's not currently above average at.
All right. And that I think takes us then to the listener questions. So there were a couple of interesting ones that we're going to go through here. And again, thank you to all of them who submit them into our Discord channel and community to get them answered on the podcast. Always a great place to join in and get involved in a either free or paid capacity for our Discord community to get into the show a little easier than those who hit us up on traditional social media platforms. But hemp ends with just the first question here. Why do we sign Garnacho over Simmons? And this is coming on the back of the news that Fabrizio was tweeting that it was, in fact, Tottenham. That's right. Tottenham Hotspurs would be the team that Xavi Simmons would end up going to. So I think very interesting that that is the way that this is all broken down. So Garnacho over Simmons, profile reason wise, Sam, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I thought the initial intention would have probably been to mirror what we've been doing on the right hand side. We've tried putting Cole Palmer there or Estevao there on the right hand side, and we've essentially got somebody who can rotate in from the right wing into the number 10 position, and Estevao, Palmer both do that. And then you've got like a 1v1 direct threat in Pedro Neto. So you've got a little bit of variety there in terms of if you want to switch up and tinker against a particular side. We unfortunately don't have that on the left. You have just Jamie Gittins, and then after that you have Alejandro Garnacho, and both are, I would say, conventional wingers, guys who are just cut in, shoot, or try to cut back down the line. So maybe in my mind, like Xavi Simmons was somebody who filled in that kind of a void on the left hand side, somebody who can come in, function in as what was happening on the right hand side. But then again, why would you do it when you have somebody like a Joao Pedro who can also play on the left wing? He has for Brighton under two different managers, and then come in and become that left sided 10. He's very, very good at it. He really likes that role. So maybe looking at his particular profile, his wage demands, and also I had like major concerns about just his defensive industry and how well he could cope from a physical standpoint. We've been burnt before with Bundesliga talents who've been talked about as generational talents and essentially failed to live up to that expectation. So maybe the SD said, look, the wage that will come to try and sign him versus the transfer fee that we'll pay. I think his the fee is around 50 million, and his wages were somewhere around 200,000, which is on the higher side. So maybe that's why for a Palmer depth option for a left wing luxury option, I would say it was why we moved towards a more specialized profile that is a 1v1 winger, somebody who can offer shooting threat from the left hand side, and then essentially I would say start even over Gittins once he's fit. So that felt like a more urgent need in my opinion. So maybe that's why we passed over Simmons.
And Leojic had a question just around the ceiling and talking about where we think the ceiling of this player is. And this is a question we typically ask in our player profile podcast that we do. Just wondering around could he surprise us, like the Palmer purchase? I don't know if it's Palmer level purchase in terms of the surprise, but maybe I'm viewing it as could he be the best of maybe this winger class that we're bringing in? I don't think maybe his ceiling in my mind is as high as someone like Estevao, but I think that could he be better than Jamie Gittins? I think that's very realistic from a ceiling perspective. Could he eventually be as good as or better than Pedro Neto is for us? That feels like it's more within the realm of possibility. But where are you at in terms of where you think his ceiling is at, and maybe kind of comparing and contrasting against the existing wingers we have at Chelsea?
I think you summed it up perfectly for me. I don't think he has a ceiling that is higher than Estevao's. I think Estevao is, you look at him and he essentially has everything that you want a world class winger to have. He not just is a very good dribbler, he can, also offer some really good off ball movement. He can also function in central zones. There's a lot of versatility to his movement. So he is what I would call a three-way winger, somebody who can offer, goal threat, assist threat, and can also offer an off-ball movement threat. With Garnacho, it's more of like he's a very functional winger. He's good. He's really good at some things, but there are other things that again you're hedging your bets on, saying can we improve them? And those are some pretty significant, not red but orange flags, which you're trying to scrub clean until they become sort of a different color. So at 30-40 million with slight sell-on clause, I think at this time it's a risk worth taking. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer. You can actually improve him a little bit, but I would say that he's more of a direct goal threat. I don't want to compare him to Mohamed Salah because he's the generational sort of aspect of a talent that didn't really work out initially but then went and became something else. But you would probably class him as somebody who's not really at the like elite world class tier of physical gifts, but more of like a really good psychologically motivated athlete, somebody who's very gritty, somebody's industry is going both ways, and then also has a really good shooting aspect on both his feet. Can also offer a couple of other things in terms of his movement. So I will say this, Dan, like I think a lot of his success will depend on how he's used, which is, I think, a pretty sad excuse to make sometimes. But if you look at his best moments, he works amazingly well when you utilize him more off the ball than on the ball. If you ask him to, put him up against a Crystal Palace back five and ask him to take it past two people, he will struggle. But you put him next to an Enzo Fernandez, who's also Argentinian, and then you've got Cucurella, who's also Spanish, and then you've got like a little bit of trio that understands each other on a linguistic level, who can create some kind of issues. Three guys who can rotate inside and out. Enzo has got some really good creative capabilities. Palmer also loves drifting out left sometimes. Joao Pedro also does. So then you can start to create something with Garnacho. He's somebody who loves one twos. He will pass it in and he'll explode past the back line. He'll try to get into those spaces. So it all depends on how good the players around him are. And I'm hoping and I'm pretty sure that at Chelsea he will have that. It's just what's the wavelength like? Like how well are they tuned in terms of on the field? And I think that will determine a major part of Garnacho's success. It's just we've got the right players, but seldom do things on paper go really well on the field. So that's definitely one to watch.
And then, we talked about a little bit about this in just the overall kind of strengths area, but his off the ball movement. There's a couple of comments around just the, Stutes asking if we sell Jackson, who, at current time of recording, looks as if Bayern Munich would be a loan option for one Nico Jackson heading into the season. Asking the question, will Garnacho's off the ball movement be able to make up for the loss of Jackson's off the ball movement in attack?
Say that's an excellent question from Studs. So that's the one worry that I had with Nico Jackson going off. And, we've got somebody like a Liam Delap who offers something different. We've then got Joao Pedro, who obviously is the counter to the Nicholas Jackson profile. He loves moving, dropping deep and trying to link up play before going into the box. In this particular context, Garnacho is somebody who offers, in my opinion, the most amount of off-ball threat. Estevao is another one on the right-hand side, but Palmer, Enzo, all of these guys, Estevao also to an extent is also an on-ball wizard. But Garnacho is somebody who can offer a lot more when he's moving into spaces. He makes these great runs from deep. He's got this really nice understanding of, third man runs and where the opportunity is to open up and exploit somebody positionally. So if you can find, this on-ball wizards with off-ball demon kind of situation where it comes together and creates a really nice attacking unit, then you have some really good balance. And I think that's why maybe also another reason why we went against an on-ball heavy profile in Xavi Simons and said, who can offer that, work hard, and also give us runs in behind now that we've lost Nicholas Jackson? I think Garnacho is your answer. Somebody who can also drift in into central spaces and still maintain that movement. I think that'll be key to making sure that we retain a lot of fluidity in attack.
And another question we typically ask with Moonrunner is also getting into it before us, though, is just around the expectation to Gittins and Estevao, which I think we talked a little bit around just within the ceilings. And again, I mean, this is also a player who now has had time playing in the Premier League. And so I do think from a adaptation standpoint that you might have for someone like Estevao or Gittins, there's maybe an expectation that he should be able to hit the ground running a little faster. The other part of the question is around just what we think a good goal and assist output would be for this season for him. And I think maybe we can kind of couch that from a both a Premier League and a all competitions amount. I would imagine that you would want to see comparable volume to what he had last season. Now, again, this is also taking into the consideration that, last season he got 3,571 minutes across all competitions. He actually has done that now 2 seasons in a row. There was an 11-minute difference between the two of them. And he had a 15 in 23-24 again, and then 24-25. He had a 21 goal contribution, goals and assists. So it does feel as if you'd like to see him land somewhere between those two, but that did happen off the back of a ton of minutes. And I don't know, does he get over 3,000 minutes this season? Would be my first question to you, because that I think would influence what I would imagine is a good or great for him when it comes to that goal and assist number.
I think he does get around 3,000 minutes for certain. I think he will be by default the number one left wing option going forward, unless of course, Estevao has the opportunity to really put down a marker in the next game and say, okay, I'm here to stay, and the new guy will have to work his way in. But on the left hand side, if you want somebody who can do the Maresca isolation versus the fullback and offer that level of threat, Pedro Neto can stretch the pitch, but there's only so much he can do from a threat perspective on the left hand side. So if you can get Garnacho there and start off the season, I would say 3,000 minutes would be relatively comfortable. In terms of a goal assist standpoint and adaptation standpoint, we gave a lot of grace to Kitten, saying, okay, it's his first season here. Estevao also, and we gave them very modest GA tallies. But with Garnacho, I would say it's probably going to be like 15 GA in the league. I think that would be a good expectation. You would want him to have a little bit of acclimatization period, but I think there is enough there to offer. Like, even in my worst expectations, he gets to 10 quite easily from a goal assist standpoint perspective. But 15 would be really nice for him. Obviously, if he gets to play against Paphos or Karabakh, then and probably Lincoln City, then that tally goes up across all competitions. And that's why I'm reluctant to include other competitions. But in the league, if he gets to 15, then he's got off to a good start. And that'll be, I think, my marker for him.
And then moving into just they called it simple men terms or simple people terms from 11 Aspies. Is he basically a left-sided, right-footed Noni? Very good one-on-ones and gets a lot of shots. Maybe just around kind of is he a drag and drop type of replacement? Doesn't feel as if that's the case to me based upon how we talked about in this episode and what I've seen so far. But do you feel like that is at least within the Venn diagram of player overlap?
It's also a very good question, in my opinion, from 11 Aspies. So this is something that I thought about when I was listening to Kia's podcast. Exactly the same thing, saying, wow, this sounds exactly like Noni does on the right-hand side. But I would say Noni was quite limited in the sense that he would just be somebody who's touchline heavy, on the ball heavy. We saw him for an extended period of time not really improve upon his off ball movement, try to create some kind of avenues from just moving into good positions. Even when he rotated into the half spaces, you could tell that he was quite uncomfortable. Like, he couldn't really receive properly, he didn't really know how to drive diagonally in. Those are little things that I think maybe force the thinking into saying, okay, but Pedro Neto there, who's played as a centre forward for Wolves, he's played as an attacking midfielder in a front three. So he's somebody who's comfortable in that position. Then if you had to bring somebody who could do that on the left hand side, then Garnacho is there. I think he's Amorim is, accidentally given him that taste of how it feels like to play in the half spaces. So he's got a little bit of experience there. And I would say from an off-ball perspective, he's miles clear of Noni. Just knowing where to be, knowing how to arrive, and even how he finishes. Like a lot of far post finishes on goals. From crosses, from cutbacks, from just set pieces. A lot of really good movement to see at the far post, which you want from your winger. So I think from that perspective, he just blows Noni out of the water. So yeah, I think the fundamentals for both are really good. Both of them get into the box. Noni also was in the 99th percentile for box touches. Also, at one point in time, was I think second behind Antoine Semenyo for shots taken in the Premier League. So from that standpoint, yes, both of them do offer it, but movement perspective, Garnacho is much better.
And then final question here from Chris L. Just asking the question, does he do anything useful outside of transition? Seems like he lacks the explosiveness to be in a 1v1, doesn't participate in the build-up play, not much of a creator. Some of the things that we did talk about as areas to improve, or maybe some of the things that he is not as great at this point in time. We're a quite good team in transition moments. So does he actually add any value in areas that we need, which again, I think is just the underline, like movement into the box, shooting. Like there are some definite things that if you look at and say, what could this Chelsea team benefit from? He does have those things. But to maybe the core point of that first question is just the outside of transition element that is going to be a little bit more of the area of opportunity, particularly, I think, as you underline, just his one-on-ones in particular. It's not that he isn't disciplined, but his one-on-ones are not necessarily that great when it's more from a defensive side.
I think that's the million-dollar question, and there's enough to suggest that he will be good. There's a lot of evidence to say that even when he's come up for United against sides that are a little more static, not really keen to engage and happy to let United have the ball, there have been moments where he's threatening with his movement. He doesn't need the ball. He's essentially trying to give, like, for example, you can go and watch the Aston Villa United game, the 3-2, quite some time ago, where he was up against Luca Digne on the right. And what he does to just disorient his fullback over and over again, physically hassling him, first threatening to shoot inside diagonally, then peeling off, and then Digne is like, where did this guy go? And then he has to drift outside. So it's just constantly being at, inside the head of your fullback, trying to give them something to be troubled about for 90 minutes. I think Garnacho does that very well. The general reputation or picture of him is that he's a nuisance or a pest, and he's exactly that on the field. I would say more so than off the field, which is just social media. So he doesn't really need to participate in build up from left wing. We haven't seen Gittins do that very often. Whoever it is that started in the left, Pedro Neto doesn't contribute to build up. He's somebody who holds with and lets the other guys do it. So from a structural standpoint, I don't think he needs to participate in build up. The 1v1 thing, I think if you give him that overload with Kukureya pushing up, you've got Enzo there, and maybe even like Joao Pedro dropping into his favored left side, or even Delap who prefers the left hand side, then you can probably see some really nice things happen. But establishing those relationships will take time. It'll also have to figure out, like, how his movement is, who can find him there. So I think Enzo will be key. Enzo will be very key on the left hand side along with Palmer. But if there's any kind of established relationship between those three guys, between Garnacho, Palmer, and Enzo, then I think you can expect some really nice things to happen. You can offer a lot of off-ball perspective. We talked about this, Dan, in a previous podcast, that we've lost a lot of box touches. We've lost a lot of shots. Like our top three shot takers last season, one is like out in the cold and the other's gone to Arsenal. So you've lost a lot of penetration, you've lost a lot of threat. At least from a numerical standpoint, if you can get somebody who compensates from a box touches and a shooting perspective, then Garnacho is it. So I would say definitely he covers those bases. and the rest hopefully you can garnish on top and make it better.
Well, a little garnish of Garnacho on the attack could be exactly what Enzo Maresca and the team are looking for as it relates to touches in the box, opportunity to shoot on his per 90s, things that we were very, very excited for him to see in the wonderful Chelsea blue this season. And hopefully this rescue from Manchester United works out well for us. One of their record signings within the top 5 of sales that this club has made externally. So that's going to do it for this one. We'd love to know your comments on YouTube. Let us know what you think about the signing. Think about the analysis. Again, thanks, Sam, for a quick turn, obviously, after the Simmons to Garnacho switch in terms of preparation for this week. But that's going to do it for this one. We'll be back after the Fulham match with our full match review. We got tons more content coming your way. We'll be looking at the end of the transfer window, how Chelsea got on across the entirety of it, as well as getting into that international break. But look, as always, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate any type of 5-star reviews you can leave on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Always appreciate it. Helps people find the show. And you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Links in the descriptions and in the show notes, London's Blue Dispatch. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.